Okay, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, who is known to some of you, Estela Zatania, who has been active on the flamenco scene as a performer and chronicler for a long time and probably knows flamenco as well as anyone. And nowadays, I read her stuff on deflamenco.com and Expo Flamenco. She's a marvelous journalist and chronicler of all things flamenco. And so here is Estela to talk about From Frankenstein to Blade Runner, the slippery slope of gypsiness in flamenco.
Together? Or do I sit out there? I should sit there.
Stand.
Stand. Oh.
So we can see each other.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the advantage.
It's fine. Oh, yeah, that's nice. Okay. Thank you so much, Peter, for the nice introduction. It's very sweet, and thank you to those people who are here to hear these presentations that we've prepared for this wonderful conference that Maida has put together for all of us. I'm here to speak about a very controversial topic, gypsies in flamenco, how they're seen and how they move and how they're considered. Well, I have this colorful title from Frankenstein to Blade Runner, which I will justify. It wasn't just to grab you. I became interested. Well, I have to explain a disclaimer first. I'm not an academic. These people who come to these events have this wonderful academic background that I could never aspire to. I was a singer, dancer, and guitarist of flamenco, and then I started writing and didn't stop. That's the only curriculum that I can actually give. I became interested in the gypsy issue, aside from the fact that obviously I'm in flamenco and it's impossible to avoid the gypsy issue. But what got me started being interested in the controversial angle. One day a friend, a colleague actually, a journalist, was talking about Jerez. I live in Jerez. Jerez de la Frontera is the most flamenco city in Spain. It's the birthplace of flamenco, or so they say. So this friend, this journalist said, the good thing about Jerez, there's no racism there, which surprised me. And people are laughing. Surprised me because I live there and all I see is racism. Big time racism. And I said, oh, well, I think that's actually a kind of a racist statement. You say there's no racism. And he said, no, your attitude is very infantile. And that when you're over 70, being called infantile is actually kind of a compliment. So, and I said to him, well, they are assimilated is the most perfect oxymoron. If they're assimilated, there's no such thing as they. Shortly afterwards, I had to present. I wrote a book a few years ago, and I had to present it on a radio program in Jerez. And they asked me to bring one of the characters from the book. They're not characters; these were people who were interviewed and had told their experiences as being flamenco people within the community of farmhands. And it was a live interview on radio, and it's about 2 minutes before the hour, and this woman called Anna, she hadn't shown up. And of course, I'm very flamenco, but I'm American. Oh my God, 2 minutes, and she hasn't come yet. And the moderator said, don't worry, they come late. And my first thought was, they who? Don't you have to establish a noun first? And then he's talking about gypsies. Okay. Then he says, they don't have a sense of time. And then it began to feel a little creepy, but I didn't say anything. And then he says, they don't wear watches. They don't wear watches. Okay, so I thought, well, this is it. Well, we've got a topic here. We're talking about extreme discrimination and otherness. I became interested in this word, otherness, which I then discovered had been studied for many years. Peter, I hope you're controlling the time because I have no idea. No, I'm just talking, and then whatever comes out, comes out. So the otherness of gypsies is the actual issue, the actual topic that I'm dealing with, and it's a very serious topic. Why do I talk about Frankenstein and Blade Runner? For the simple reason that the Frankenstein creature was never called a monster, by the way. He's called a creature. And it's an example of otherness. There were the normal people, and then there was this other person or being who was called the Frankenstein creature, who had the possibility of being redeemed, unothered, and humanized, because if you know this movie or the book, he ran across an old blind violinist, and they kind of made friends, and the monster or the creature began to smile, and he was taught the word friend, you friend, me friend, and it was all very humanizing, and he seemed on the verge of becoming unothered. Unfortunately, then he went down to the river and killed a little girl, which put him right back as the other. But it's a kind of an otherness when you have the possibility of being unothered, which I don't know if gypsies have this right or this possibility. In Blade Runner, there were creatures, well, not creatures, they were robots, but they looked extremely human. There's a book and there's a film. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this work. It was quite an important film in its time. And they looked completely human. They didn't act thoroughly human, but it was difficult to tell who were these, they called them replicants, who were the replicants and who were the real people. So that's an example of being incurably different, because they were to be shot on sight. There had been a rebellion or some sort of thing. They were to be killed on sight. They were fully othered. There was no chance of redemption. And this is another way of viewing the gypsy. So the question is, which is closer to the true gypsy profile regards flamenco? So if you're in the gypsy replicant model means you're okay for making music, but not for fraternalization. They might be dangerous. They're to be dealt with if it has to be. They have a lot to offer, but keep your distance. They're not to be trusted. This is very close to the way gypsies, a lot of people are shaking their heads. This is the way gypsies are viewed within the flamenco community. Great for making a musician, but don't take them home with you. They're not keepers. So this distinction between us and the others in all circumstances that use that distinction perpetuates an artificial superiority. We are wonderful, we are whatever, we are the great. Them, oh yeah, they make nice music, right? This is the profile that I see. I don't see assimilation, as my friend saw. No assimilation. And then in the title of the talk, I included the slippery slope of gypsiness. Okay, we're going to start sliding down this slippery slope. The ambiguity of the word gypsy, you can say, this person is a gypsy, or you can say, this person sings and dances in a gypsy style. It's completely different, isn't it? And this is what we're always juggling, and the person speaking at any given moment is using one definition or the other, the noun or the adjective, depending on what suits his purposes at that moment. Cervantes, the author, of course, of the famous Don Quixote classic, in the 1600s, he referred to gypsy style of doing music. He did not ever refer to gypsy music, so for him it was always an adjective, which is telling. It's very interesting. So what is gypsiness? What is gypsiness? On the plane, I started thinking, I wrote down a few words. intensity, swagger, exotic, tragic, histrionic, bohemian, edgy, all the things that Northerners kind of admire secretly if need be. That's what gypsiness is. In the 19th century, we now know that dancers in London and Paris took descriptions of what travelers throughout Spain, what they call the travelers, historic travelers, who sent back descriptions of lascivious dancing and these women who just danced in a way that was very provocative. They sent back these reports. When you look at the drawings of the era, it doesn't correspond very much. You see these dainty ladies, but the stories came back in this way, and the best dancers in Paris and in London concocted a Spanish style of dancing based on these reports. And it went so well that they actually started claiming that they were authentic gypsies. Thus began flamenco dance in many ways. I mean, there were other influences, but that's what put the gypsiness into flamenco. Which brings us to the issue of in the blood. We always hear, oh, so-and-so is a great singer or a great dancer because, of course, his mother's gypsy, his father's gypsy, it's in the blood. You know, as if there were little red things running through your vein. I mean, people take it very literally. How do I know they take it literally? Because I've taken it upon myself to say to people, what happens if a kid is born in Jerez, for example, this heart of Gypsyland, to a gypsy family, and then is taken to Wisconsin when at the age of 3 weeks or 4 weeks? And the answer, the people don't have to think about it. They go, oh, well, of course, yeah, they'll be flamenco. And I say, really? And they say, well, you'd have to probably give them a recording or something to get the basics. But yes, they would be able to do it very well before anyone else. It's amazing, but this is what people say and think, the majority of people. In the USA, in slavery times, one single great-grandparent constituted being black. At least that's what I've read. One great-grandparent, I think that would be like 1/16 or something. In flamenco, not even 1/2 is good enough. You have to be gypsy por los cuatro costados, all four sides, the whole thing. But then, what do we do with certain artists who are extremely gypsy in their product is totally gypsy-ish, and they've become famous, and it doesn't seem like imitation, it seems totally real, such as El Capullo de Jerez, such as La Sayago, La Periñaca, Lola Flores. Lola Flores. Who could be more gypsy? Well, none of these people are gypsy. So what do we do? How do we deal with that? They say they must be gypsy, but they don't know it. The mother had some sort of relation, nobody ever knew, always. Yeah, we're all laughing because it's crazy, but this is what people say. And if I still have time, yeah. We have these television ads sponsored by the Gypsy Association of Spain or whatever, to protest the word trapichero in the dictionary, the official dictionary of the Real Academia de la Lengua, where the third definition of gitano, gypsy, is trapichero. What is a trapichero? Kind of a con man, con artist, wily businessman, always insinuating something not quite on the up and up. And of course, it's not a favorable way of looking at gypsies, but it is what people think. So what do these ads do? They take small children, like 5 years old or so, 6 years old, and they put this enormous dictionary in their laps, and they put them in front of the camera, and they say, look up the word gypsy, and they go, boom, boom, boom. And read that third definition, or however they indicate it, and it says, trapichero, and the voice says, what is it? Are you a trapichero? What is a trapichero? Then they say, I'm not a trapichero. They all say very like, it just breaks your heart. But it's very manipulative. It's totally manipulative because, for one thing, obviously you cannot change reality by changing a word in a dictionary. If that were so easy, well, we just take out the word cancer, we take out the word war, things like that that we don't like. But it was a long-running TV ad that obviously cost a lot of money to put on national television. And now a very nice little tiny anecdote, personal, that will give you another perspective on how gypsies are seen in Spain. About 45 years ago, my son, I've got a son who's 50 years old, and he was 5 years old, and he had a very serious kidney disease. He's fine now, he's wonderful. But back then, we thought we were going to lose him, and we were told he had a 40% chance of surviving. So we asked around for the best kidney specialist. There was a kidney disease that he had. And we were sent to a doctor in Seville, Dr. Carvalho, who did this treatment for about a year and a half, and he saved my son's life. And when it was all over and we were saying goodbye and thank you and all this, he says, so why did you come to Spain anyway? I said, well, we do flamenco. And he goes, oh, flamenco. He says, you know, I'm a gypsy and I'm supposed to love flamenco. And he said, I really don't get into it. And I looked at him and I thought, yeah, he doesn't wear the gold chains, but he's got that hair and the nose and the color. And I was so shocked. I think I went out of the office in shock. This doctor who saved my son's life is a gypsy. And then I thought, well, if you ask any Spaniard, is that man a gypsy? They'll all say no. They'll all say no. So then we're actually talking about a social distinction, a social level. We're not really talking about a race, but people don't get it like that. It's a very complicated issue. And before finishing, I want to cite in the conference description, who I don't know who wrote it, one of the goals was to disrupt outmoded discourses of authenticity. I protest because there is such a thing as authentic flamenco. There definitely is. The question is, how do we define it? That's very difficult. How do we define what's authentic, what's not? Should we do it by race or by where the person comes from? But of course, authentic flamenco does exist. And so my questions in conclusion that are left unanswered: do we need otherness? Do we need otherness to preserve what's special and what we love about flamenco? Does flamenco end when gypsies become domesticated? Does it end when they look like kidney specialists? Well, what skin color should they have? Basically, is it cultural or is it physiological? And a postscript, which I just wrote down at the last minute. There's a singer in Spain, a flamenco singer, very good, not gypsy. His name is Alejandro Villaescusa. You know him, right? Quite a good singer, quite a brilliant guy, and a great sense of humor. So he started an organization of non-gypsies to demand the rights of the non-gypsies in flamenco, which is pretty funny. It's funny, and yet it makes you think. It really does. It highlights the folly of racism, not only in flamenco, but in just about everything, right? I don't know if I went under, over. That's pretty much what I wanted to say.
You were just right, I'd say.
Oh, great,
Thank
great,
you.
great.
Okay, we started a few minutes late. My job is to make sure we end on time, but I think we could take a couple of minutes for questions. I mean, obviously, this is a huge topic, and I'm sure a lot of people have things to say, comments, questions.
Mona?
Well, one thing is that when we talk about other, we always assume who the we is. So we white people are talking about the other, or we Payos, or we non-gypsy, we Gaji. But it's important to look at it from the other position, flamencos. You know, like to suggest that flamenco will disappear when otherness disappears is to suggest that their reality is not there.
There are all kinds of ways to find differences between people. The other could be the fat ones and the thin ones, the old ones and the young ones, any distinction you want to make. Obviously, we're talking about the otherness in flamenco. And how important is it to be gypsy in order to do credible flamenco? That's the question we all have to answer. And without the silliness of they're gypsy and they don't know it, that kind of thing doesn't make any sense at all. I'm not sure if that's what you're saying.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is that the heart of flamenco resides in the cultural context of the people who are making it in their culture, within their culture.
Do you think it's possible otherness was developed by the others, or by us being always, of course, superior? We assume that we are the superior ones and the others, they're okay, but they are the other. Do you think it's possible they cultivated that?
Well, I mean, this is what you're raising is a very hot topic in gypsy studies, or Roma studies, which it's called now. And, there's a lot of people arguing about this, but it seems like the common consensus is that Roma culture developed partly in response to the society around it that was rejecting it.
Yeah, I've read things like that, they said, like, okay, we can do that, we can be gypsy. Yeah, that's definitely, people are people, everyone starts out the same, and then they start looking for the differences. And in this case, the differences of gypsies involve dominating a very lucrative market. As we all know, in the last 2 or 3 decades, flamenco has become an extremely sellable item. When I started out 50, 60 years ago, flamenco was low-life stuff. Nobody was interested in it. Do you want to select?
You can select. But.
Okay.
I appreciate very much everything you have to say, and as a Spaniard, I love to see the perspective of someone who comes from another culture and lives in Spain, and has been very illuminating to me. So thank you. I've been wanting to meet you for many years, and I've heard things about you from all the communities in Spain, gypsy and non-gypsy.
Great.
And I have to respectfully disagree about the ad that the National Association of Gypsies in Spain created, because for us, that was a claiming of stop identifying the word Gitano with trapacero, which means a liar. And if that's in the dictionary of the Royal Academy of the Language, right, and it's an official definition, that's something that we can no longer tolerate. So I just respectfully disagree that was a manipulative ad, because it was about time after 500 years of having this double halo relationship with the other, right? With the one who is dares to be different. And that thing was very timely and very precious to have the young generation say, I'm not a trapacero. And hopefully the Royal Academy, the Real Academia will change the definition. And to me that was a reclaiming, and it was something very needed. So I look forward to the day when that definition is no longer as an official definition that defines Gitano.
Yeah, well, the definition tries to reflect the reality of how the word is used. It's not their fault if it's used that way. I'm sure there are a lot of words in the dictionary that you could protest. Why do we say that? Well, we say it. It's the definition. How many mothers in Spain have said to their children, wash your hands, you look like a gypsy? So that's not nice, but that's what people...
Why did you object to the ad?
Because I thought it was manipulative for this reason, to imply that it was the fault of the dictionary people, that it included a definition that was offensive. I don't understand that. It's their obligation to reflect the true definition of how the word is used. What they should say, no, we won't put that because it's not nice. That's crazy.
I think there are two sides to that, what she said and what you said. Of course, you're right. I mean, if that's what it means, it's what it means. But having a child sit there and say that's not me is a good thing. Even though your argument is correct, you can't change the dictionary for that reason. In the same way that we object in the dictionary,
Jude, same thing.
Exactly the same.
Exactly.
More than two sides, I would think.
Yes.
Yeah. Such a complicated question. Let's have one more comment.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was intrigued near the end when you brought up the idea about authentic flamenco. And rather than asking you what your definition of authentic flamenco would be, I wonder what your reaction might be to some of what Juan Carlos Lerida's work.
Juan Carlos Lerida.
Juan Carlos Lerida and what he's doing now about like the essence of flamenco and what is authentically flamenco, perhaps, of some definitions of just the hands and percussive footwork and coming from the soul, and how that might interact with your definition of what authentic flamenco is.
Well, that's actually that's a loaded question because I'm a reviewer, and every single time I write a review, I have to weigh the facts and be careful what I say. We don't want to hurt people's feelings, don't want to lay down the law. Of course, I have my idea of what's authentic. Whether I could define it in less than 1,000 or so words, I don't know. For me, it has to have at least a bit of singing. There has to be the rhythms, some traditional melody, something that says flamenco to me, not just because the artist says this is a flamenco show, which they don't usually do, such as Juan Carlos Lerida. I don't know if he actually comes on saying, now we're going to do our flamenco, or even in interviews. He does his show, and it's the people who construe what they think it is. It's a flamenco festival. He's in the festival, so it must be flamenco. We see that a lot of avant-garde dancers. We have Rocio Molina, who comes on naked and calls it flamenco. There are all kinds of things. Israel Galvan, Andres Marin, wonderful artists, all of them. They tend to be actually the best dancers, but then they have this intelligence, which is so huge. They find other paths that go away from flamenco that, for me, are hard to assimilate, mostly because of my age. You have your era that you were born and the flamenco that you've known, and you're always looking for that certain special aroma. See, I didn't even commit.
Can I say one very quick thing? I just want to say it also works the other way. I actually got thrown out of the Facebook group for saying that Paco de Lucia was not Gitano.
Well, he's not.
That's my point. I
Well-
got thrown out because I said he was not Gitano.
Yeah, that's
They
crazy.
needed him to be Gitano. I'm just talking about what the other possibilities are.
It stirs passions. Gypsy, non-gypsy is very controversial. Well,
Thanks. I think we should move on.
okay.
Right. Yeah, that was wonderful. And Estela brought up so many, of course, controversial and complicated topics, and I'm sure we could talk about them a lot more. But we need to move on. We're only 6 minutes behind schedule, which is good because we started out 10 minutes behind. So now let's move on to Raúl Rodríguez, who is known to many of you. And of course, if you saw the film last night, he was featured in that and will be performing tonight.
Yeah, let's just, while you set up, Raúl, just, I think the tickets are still available on Eventbrite tonight. So it's at the Nacional, which is on 14th Street between 7th and 8th Avenues at 8 o'clock. So we'll finish right at 6:30. You can go down to the Nacional and you can tell them that you came from this conference, and they will give you a 10% discount at their wonderful new restaurant, which is downstairs. And so please, the tickets are $15 for students and seniors and $20 for everybody else. So please do come down and join us for a wonderful ending.
Right. Be there or be square. Esté allá o sea un cuadrante. I don't know. Forget it. It doesn't work. So the title of Raúl's presentation is AntropoMúsica, la ida y la vuelta.
Okay, so good morning. Thank you, Mayra. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you to this wonderful place. It's a dream come true for me to be here, to present my work, to introduce my work, to introduce this instrument, and to introduce my ideas about the tangled roots of flamenco. So there's one thing that the people in Andalusia used to say, the old people in Andalusia used to say, and they say, don't tell it, do it. So I made a mix in between anthropology and music and creation. It's a way to find a way to don't get crazy, because when I started studying anthropology, cultural anthropology in Sevilla, I started to play as a musician in so many bands and so many projects that mix flamenco with blues or with jazz or with rock. I came from a family that did some things new in the flamenco music in the 70s and the 80s. I'm a son of Martirio, is a very, very good singer from Spain. It's not because it's my mother, but she's really good. And also I've been educated in this context of Veneno, Pata Negra, and other bands who mix the first approaches in between flamenco and other music. Flamenco and music's also from the Afro diaspora, as the blues, as the jazz. So I try to find a way to explain the things of my fathers did, and I try to be purista with my old people. I try to do the song of my home, El Cante de mi casa. I try to do the same thing that my fathers did, but in my own time. So I want to explain to you my way of working is a mix in between these two ways to make an approach, research about the documents, about the pre-flamenco time, that the music that we had in the 16th, 17th century, 18th century, and the fact of creation, because I believe that creation is the mother of tradition. The tradition is not finished. It's not one thing that you take that is closed. It's always open. Every time when it's happening, it's also happening again. When you are recreating something, you are creating a new way. So I believe that we must keep on creation to keep the tradition goes on. So I create my own songs, I create my own lyrics, and I create this instrument that is a mix in between the Cuban tres and the flamenco guitar. It's a flamenco tres, it's the only one in the world. And I think this is the way. I think this is a way to go back to the future, to go back to the things that they happen, and to make new things. So, in order to this, No lo digas, hazlo, I want to sing you a song about these old tangled roots. My first song in this work, the Razón de Son, and I made these beautiful editions in book CD. This is my second work, La Raíz Eléctrica. The first one is Razón de Son, and I make a mix in between the anthropological research and the stories about the songs. So. No, thanks. These are also beautiful pictures by a very, very friend of mine, Jesus Cosano. Maybe one of the first guys I hear talking about the black influences in Andalusia. Maybe I came with you.
Aquí vengo con mi son a cantarte frente a frente, a bailarte con ambiente y a tocarte el corazón. Voy buscando la razón que se esconde en los rincones, tomando posiciones y encontrando semejanza. Yo voy buscando la danza que late en los corazones. Traigo un son de barco viejo, traigo un punto marinero, ay, traigo un compás compañero que te parte los pellejos. Y atravesó el espejo de los mares de poniente y vivido entre la gente, compartiendo la cultura. Y las razas no son tan puras, ni somos tan diferentes. Yo he visto los mismos sones en los puertos más lejanos. Hay ritmos que son hermanos de antiguas generaciones. He tocado celebraciones hasta las claras del día. Yo he visto una bulería rematando en la parranda. Ay, he visto a la zaranda bailando por alegría.
Thank you so much. So that's my way. That's my way. I think the main concern for me is not what we know, but what we can do with that things that we know. So it's beautiful to study the things that on the past in the flamenco, but I think we must go further, one step ahead, and make creation and make new things. And talking about the Tangled roots, I love to study the roots as a natural way, as an ecological way. When we talk about roots, people used to think in one only root. But I used to think about the rhizome or the mycorrhizas, that kind of web that is underground. You know the trees, as it is, the trees talk one to the other. It's the fungus association with the roots that makes this energy and these materials go from one tree to another. All the roots are mixing underground. We don't see it. We don't see it. We only see the trees, we see the flowers, we see the fruits, and we almost think about it that the things are the things that we can see, but underground is happening and other things that it's like a web, it's really like a web. I think also the world of ideas, the world of culture, it works in the same system. So I can think one thing, I can make a thing in my mind, and you can make the same way of thinking, and you maybe remember somebody, and this person calls you at the next day. So when you are playing in a band, a few times you are playing something and say, wow, this rhythm could be good, and the drummer plays, choop, and he's playing. No? There are things that we don't know how it's happening, but when we think in the Tangled roots of flamenco, I think the life is Tangled roots, and the ideas is Tangled roots, and the music is a show of Tangled roots. It's a party of Tangled roots. So I think that we must study the roots with joyful and not with some sorrow and so serious way, you know. So we can make an approach as the ecological minds. So we can feel the music as a representation that what's happening underground. So if we can make something new, we must look back to the past and to see what happened in the past. So thinking that things, you can feel in Andalusia, it was a really meeting point, maybe the first meeting point at the global war, and Sevilla and Cádiz especially, with Moorish people, Jewish people, Castilian people, Iberian people, Gypsy people, and black people. The black culture, the black influence is now, when we are talking about that, with Gurumbe, or with the work of Cosano, or the work of José Luis Navarro, the work of Meira, or the works of so many people now that we are talking about that. I think this is the most important thing that is happening in the flamenco theory in the last years, because we can make real feelings about the music, and we can make an approach to see how bulería is maybe a develop of that first rhythms in zarabanda that we had in the 16th century, 17th century, that it was so popular that it was forbidden. ¿Qué ambientazo no se formaría para que lo prohibieran, no? How joyful it was, so it was forbidden. And also the fandango, we can make an approach in fandango, thinking that fanda in Kikongo, it was party, fiesta, and ngo as mandinga, as Congo, as so many words related to a black and Afro influence. Or also the tango, with the tanga, and with the tango, even it's a rhythm that came also from African influences. That Afro diaspora make a sweet revenge in the history, because they were rhythm that came as a slave, now are dances that make us free. So if the trad market, if the market of the slaves were as the people from the East, Slavos, as it was before the African market, maybe today we were all dancing kalinka, but now we are dancing music that in most of the cases it came from the West African coast, from the Malian Imperial or the Songhai culture or Ghana culture. So we have so many music on there. It's so unknown music and unknown culture. We are so ignorant about Africa that we don't know really what happened now in there. So we can see in the music that for today that feelings and that things. For not to be so long, I want to do another song talking about the negros curros, that it was new. I noticed the history that now is talking about the negros curros in another class, the Cuban girl, huh? Yeah. So, you know, the curros, it was the Andalusian people from Sevilla and from Cádiz in Cuba. They named curro to make the distinction of another immigrants from Iberia, from Spain, Catalonian people, Canarian people, or Gaelican people. So they named curro to that people that talk with the S, and they were always joking, they were always playing, they were always improvising the decimas and the lyrics, and they were always in the border of the law. So very, very pre-flamenco people from the 16th. Maybe you can feel that the curros, the majos, the pícaros, and the flamenco, and the rock people now in Sevilla, it was the same line of sinvergüenzas. So you can feel that. So I want to show you these beautiful pictures about the old books that Jesus Cosano made also. Make El Negro Curro, and then we can talk and other things. Okay? It's also a new style, a new rhythm, making a mix in between bulería and son. So I named sonería, because when you play bulería, you play in 12, and when you play song, you play tum pa 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 So I put this anticipated bass line in the bulería in order to make bulería danceable for everyone, not only for the people who knows how to play, how to dance bulería. So I make tum pa
Voy a contarles mi historia, y que alguno se la sabe. Regalaré la llave del hueco de mi memoria. Yo no tengo aquella gloria que otros flamencos tuvieron, porque de ellos sí escribieron los que tenían buena pluma. A mí se me debe una, y aunque no compusieron. Negro curro de invierno, yo nací en Andalucía, por eso curros me decían, cuando aparecía en La Habana, aquella tierra era hermana, el mundo que conocí. Yo no soy cabarí, ni digo mío, ni congo, soy flamenco, ni congo, son que me gustan. Siempre llevo sombrero y mi pañuelito rojo, yo tengo más de 100 ojos para ver el mundo entero con mi artesanía y la saca en el camino. Siempre vivo para el trajín y a mí se me pulga tan rara que no le pusiera fin. Siendo Sevilla la dueña del universo explorado, yo solo fui esclavizado por una guapa blasfemia. No duerme aquel que no sueña, y el que sueña se despierta con la mente más abierta a seguir buscando a lo que yo tuviera un tesoro. Campo norte de la puerta. Yo no tengo religión, solo mi cura es mi diosa. A mí me importan las cosas que tienen razón de son. Yo vengo de aquel rincón de los puertos andaluces. Soy del siglo de las luces y sin dejar de bailar he llegado hasta el manglar. Aquí no mandan las cruces. Ella a mí no hay quien me esclavice. Yo ya nací libertario. Yo tengo un don extraordinario para que no me martiricen. Soy amigo del que dice la verdad en la casa plena. Tengo una razón muy buena para vivir en los manglares, porque aquí no hay militares. Yo canto décimas al viento y en la calle soy poeta de bandurria y de chancleta, de falseta y sentimiento. Yo compongo en el momento lo que dicta el corazón y te robo cualquier son. Si me gusta el son, que te lo aprendo y se me mete en la carne del corazón. Soy pícaro y valentón, come gente, traga hombre, ponen más de 100 nombres a este curro vacilón. Taco, cheche y cortetón, come candela y charraja, churros, jarra y rufián, no saben qué más llamarles si quieren venir a buscarte, conmigo se encontrarán. Nobody knows, nobody talks about. We can make a chorus, and maybe you can go with me to this negro curro. Okay? Yeah? Negro curro! Negro curro!
Negro burro, negro burro, negro burro, negro burro, negro burro, negro burro.
Ay, negro curro, a mí me dicen, yo soy negro de pellejo, pero soy andaluz viejo. Aunque algunos me contradicen, no consiento que me dicen la historia que debo escribir. Y de nuevo estoy aquí y canto para contarte que yo siempre tuve arte. Quiera que viva.
Okay, so thank you. That's my way to make AntropoMúsica in the conviction that if you cannot play something, you cannot understand the music. If you want to study the music, the popular music, you must learn how to play something. I mean, play some guitar, some local guitar in the popular music that you are studying, singing, making claps, or haciendo de callador, making silence. You know, in the real parties, there's always somebody that has a good listening, and in the right time to that people that is talking, say, shh. There's a way also to be into the party, because when it's happening, there is something special happening. You are burning in a fire. If you don't feel that you're burning in this fire, you don't understand really the practice of music, the happening of music. So that's my way. I hope you like it.
Thank you. That was great. Whichever day.
I don't know if we have time.
I'm wondering if we should perhaps move on, but at least we got a taste of what tonight's performance will include. But I know we're a little bit pressed for time, and Constance, her presentation is a bit at the max, so maybe we should proceed.
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along then, our next presenter is Constance Valis-Hill, who is a professor emerita at Hampshire College, and we'll talk about Color of Reality, John Booz, is that how you say that? Little Buck, and Black Lives in Livid Color.
Just started. Thank you, Mayra.
Do I have some young person who can come and find me the internet?
Thank you.
Can you, Noel?
I want to thank Mayra.
Young.
And thank you, Raúl, for making me dance and for inspiring my writing. My paper doesn't directly relate to flamenco, but I'm hoping that this film, Color of Reality, will help us to discern how the tangled roots forces the body to question and to resist. So we'll begin with that.
Or to blood. So was there?
Yes, this is graphic video. We know Sterling was armed and things escalated.
Rallied before the meeting, trying to sway the decision maker.
Was involved in his murder.
You look at the video showing a deadly officer-involved shooting in Louisiana.
Graphic body cam and dash cam video of an officer-involved shooting where an unarmed black teenager was killed by police.
advocating the worst mass shooting now in American history. We are learning more, though, about who did it. What more have you been able to learn?
Color of Reality, the 6-minute short film written, directed, and co-choreographed by John Booz and fellow movement artist Charles Littlebuck Riley, in collaboration with painter and installation artist Alexa Mead, was released on September 6th, 2016, 3 years after the naissance of the Black Lives Matter movement, an anti-racist movement created initially in response to the shooting death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida, by a self-proclaimed vigilante, George Zimmerman, who was later acquitted. Going beyond the extrajudicial killings of Black people by police and vigilantes, Black Lives Matter broadened the conversation around state violence to include the virulent and anti-Black racism that had, for centuries, permeated American society, and thus became an artistically explosive call to arms. Inspired by the forlorn dismay of the police shootings of young Black men, Color of Reality will be counted as one of the seminal anthems of the Black Lives Matter movement, as it offers the most articulate, empathetic, and encapsulating response to police brutality. The film is mesmerizing, in large part for the striking visual scenography of the painter Alexa Mead. In the opening scene, we could be looking at a colorful still life, a domestic scene, the interior of a living room painted in the broad strokes of a Van Gogh painting, in the calming shades of blue and purple, conjuring the image of a bright blue sky. And in it, the figures of two men sitting on a couch in front of a TV. It's not until the camera zooms in on this still life and the close-up of the men, their eyes peering through thick strokes of paint, that we discern how Mead is challenging our visual senses. Are we looking at a two-dimensional painting or a three-dimensional performance work? Mead began her career as a painter and then turned to finding more unconventional painting surfaces, bodies, and inanimate objects in a way that collapsed depth, making her models appear two-dimensional when photographed. Turning people into paintings, the mask of paint on body and objects reverts the portrait into a two-dimensional experience. In Color of Reality, this technique becomes so materially oppressive as to challenge its living and breathing subjects to reclaim their corporeality. The power of the body, the black body, prevails over the suppressive acrylics that attempt to smother it. In the opening scene, as you'll recall now, the camera frames a brightly painted interior of a living room and the figures of two men seated on a couch. Above the escalating elegiac chords of an electronic score by DBR Wonder Girl, we hear sound bites. Yes, it's a graphic video, everything from shots to blood. An unarmed teenager was killed by police. These people were involved in his murder. The camera zooms in on the men, panning the painted blue-streaked wall, side table, lamps, stacks of books, plastic snap wrappers, and a can of soda, settling on a paint-streaked, brown-skinned hand placed on the armrest of the couch. And then it cuts to the television screen where a black anchorman, this is CBS News correspondent Vladimir Duthiers, describing a video showing the deadly officer involved in a shooting in Louisiana. There's a reaction shot that closes in on the attentive faces of the men, their slow and steady breathing, barely perceptible, with a cut back to the television where a female anchorwoman reports a graphic body cam and dash cap video of an officer involved shooting where an unarmed black teenager was killed by police. In a startling reaction shot, Boog's arm involuntarily shoots up from the armrest and with a remote in hand flips off the set. The camera cuts to an extreme close-up of little Buck breathing heavily. Behind the painted mask, we see his glazed, large brown eyes peering through the thick yellow and green strokes of paint. In an infinitely small movement, he downcasts his eyes, signaling despondence, and sighs deeply, his head rotating from side to side. It's a riveting, heartbreaking moment that encapsulates a sobering state of being alive, thus breaking the two-dimensionality of the narrative. The camera cuts to a long shot of the men seated side by side on the couch, estranged and isolated in thought. The score begins to pulsate as each man rises in turn from the couch to soliloquize upon their state of mind through their personal movement language. And this movement language from Little Buck, it's really based, it's Jukin, and it's really based in this Memphis style of and I'd love to talk to you about it more. And also Boogs is really from, it's an LA style that's popping, that's really about the explosiveness of energy rather than the internalizing of energy. And I hope my description of their solos can give you a better idea of it. The onslaught of news about the murder and violence against black men both saddens Boogs and Buck and awakens them to action. Boogs bounces from the couch to stand erect, his knees shimmering, arms flailing, shaking, his body to attention. A burst of energy emanating from the base of his spine travels up through the torso, sending his arms into a windmill of deflections and down the legs, propelling his sneakered feet to nimbly heel and toe sideways. He sinks wide-legged into a deep and jagged knee bend that resembles the metatarsal of a tarantula, and then draws himself straight up into staunch verticality. Alert, inviolable, and with a fixed jaw, he struts in slow and steady motion back to the couch, challenging Little Buck. Buck rises from the couch to perch precariously on the tip of his sneaker, extending the free leg to waver in the air. He dwells in a long moment of reflection. Tittering in balance, he cups both hands to his heart, as if extracting it from his chest, and tosses it into the air, setting his body into a slithering disarray of crisscrossing arms and legs. Buck's solo is all about how the body retains equilibrium after it has been thrown out of whack. An invisible jab to the chest causes the torso to fold over, only to be flipped into a backbend. An uppercut to the jaw causes the body to twist into a succession of turns. Arms undulating, his feet take on a furious dialogue, sliding, gliding, tiptoeing as if walking through a minefield, turning on the tips of the toes, descending as being swallowed up in a well, sliding across the floor on one knee, falling backwards and bouncing back. It's a narrative of fall and recovery, backward, fall and recovery, descent and resurrection that simulates a battle with invisible foes in which he always recovers. Buck's recovery, the call to restitution, is so corporeal powerful as to again retrieve Boogs from the couch. Together, in slow motion, they walk single file toward the door. The men walk out the door. Okay, time. The men walk out the door and onto the street with newfound consciousness and determination, the dancing fueling their activism. The visual clash between the dreamy quality of the set and the cold exterior of steel, brick, and concrete make the harshness of the outside world more vivid. They make their way down the isolated street, stumbling over their feet, gazing up at brick buildings with steel grates, and the few pedestrians, white and brown-skinned men and women, shove them, refuse their handshakes, pass them by, render them invisible. And as isolated as they were in their paint-streaked room, they are more so on the cold, gray sidewalk. Suddenly, 2 gunshots ring out, making the men stop short in their track. A close-up on Boog's face, a cut to little Buck's face, then back to Boog's as the camera slowly moves down his chest to settle on a pool of red-soaked liquid. Is it paint? Is it blood? Gushing from his heart into his cupped hands. The men, cupping the blood that spills from their gut, crumble to the ground, their legs that sent them skimming nimbly, collapsing like a deck of cards. The camera leaves us with 2 brief close-ups on the faces of these stricken men, their large brown eyes wide open, gazing into fathomless space, and flies up and away, rendering the scene of the men sprawled on the street in a pool of blood into a 2-dimensional image that is abstract. The message is simple: senseless violence must come to an end. On my first viewing of Color of Reality, I was mesmerized by the bold, attention-grabbing visual qualities of the film, the schizophrenic back-and-forth dementia from 2 to 3-dimensionality, the brash brushstrokes on skin, furniture, walls, and Mead's claiming of all these as paintable surfaces, the final tableau and the hauntingly predictable ending of the film that restored the blood and gore reality of the murder into a more cooling, abstract image. On multiple successive viewings of the film, I have stepped away from the immediate visual gratification to more objectively, I hope, discern the elements that motivate the deepest compassionate response to the fatal shootings of these men of color. And that is their danced solos, their profound soliloquies on the pain of prejudice, injustice, and mass incarceration. Behind the acrylic mask, Boog's and Buck's warm eyes and expressive faces propel us to see the whole body, the flesh and bone of the movement, so filled with pranic energy that it bleeds through the confines of the cracked acrylic paint, where we feel the powerful throb of life. Mead's visual manipulation of 2- and 3-dimensionality materializes the dilemma that W.B. Du Bois so urgently articulated about Black identity and double consciousness. As long as Boogs and Buck remain 2-dimensional in the painted room, they do not bring danger to themselves and are relegated to invisibility. They are as harmless as a picture postcard. As soon as they break out of artifice, the artifice of 2-dimensionality, to the factuation of 3-dimensional aliveness, they are in dire danger. Ultimately, neither space offers solace or safety, which is the underlying reality of the film, as these men are either relegated to the intimate internal space of living color, where the deepest of emotional utterances of pain and suffering can be articulated, or the insufferable fate of existing in a colorless, terrorizing urban landscape. Inside, imprisonment, incarceration. Outside, prey to be hunted in the urban jungle. Where then does reality lie? What are the means of survival for these young Black men who must breathe through the suffocating confines of the mask, embodying stealth and subversion, slipping, spinning, gliding, tiptoeing nimbly through a minefield, ready to explode unpredictably behind a mask of cool? Color of Reality is a eulogy for all Black men who dare step into three-dimensionality. Amadou Diallo in the New York City subway, Alton Sterling outside a Baton Rouge convenience store, Philandro Castile off a highway in Minneapolis, Keith Lamont Scott in his SUV in Charlotte, Terrence Crutcher standing in the middle of the street next to a stalled vehicle in Tulsa, Tyre King in an alley in Columbus. However confident they are when they venture into the world, the sobering reality is that no one gives a damn or wants to hear from them. Meanwhile, their deaths confirm that nothing changes or has changed from the time of Amadou until now. The saddest reality is that it has always been this way for people of color since the beginning of America. That is the reality of color. Where Color of Reality does make its most original, enduring contribution to our lives and to the Black Power, Black Lives Matter movement is that John Booz and Charles Little Buck Riley have created an artistic language. It's that of movement that is poetic, elevated, and enduring to give expression to Black struggle in the millennium. Thank you.